The Agenda with Steve Paikin is Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Shelves and shelves full of reports have documented Canada's history with Indigenous people, from the now 5-year-old Truth and Reconciliation Commission to the Royal Commission of 30 years ago. Has it added up to real progress, or have we hit the wall? We'll consider that tonight. Then, a conversation about healing from past injustice. It's Wednesday, January 20th, and that's ahead on the agenda. It's now been a little over 5 years since the final report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada outlined 94 calls to action. The purpose, in part, was to begin to heal some of the profound harms caused by the residential school system and move towards a new relationship between Canada and Indigenous people from coast to coast to coast. With us now for their perspectives on what's transpired in the years since, and let's introduce our guests, as is our custom, from furthest away to closest to our studio in Kanesatake, Quebec, Grand Chief Serge Simon of the Mohawk Council of Kanesatake. In the nation's capital, Gabrielle Fayant, a youth activist and co-founder and CEO of A7G, that's the Assembly of Seven Generations, a national youth-led nonprofit organization. In Ajax, Ontario, Pamela Palmater, professor and chair in Indigenous governance at Ryerson University. And in the Greektown neighborhood of the provincial capital, Clayton Shirt, elder in residence at the Waakabaness Bryce Institute for Indigenous Health at the U of T's Dalla Lana School of Public Health. And we really appreciate all four of you making time for us and our viewers and listeners here on TVO tonight. I just want to start our conversation by playing, well, some tape from back in the day. Here is Murray Sinclair, the Chief Commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commissioner, as the TRC kicked off its research.
We want Canadians to understand that this is not just an Aboriginal problem. This is a Canadian issue that needs to be addressed. The relationship between Aboriginal people and non-Aboriginal people in this country has been damaged by these schools. And part of that damage is not merely what happened to the students in the schools. That damage is also what happened to Canadians who went to their own schools and who were taught what they were taught, or not taught what they should have been taught about Aboriginal people in this country.
Pamela Palmater, to you first. Do you believe the TRC has achieved what it set out to do?
I think the TRC has, in terms of public education, in terms of increasing awareness, in terms of making some of our problematic colonial history knowledgeable, and including, students in schools. That is completely separate to whether or not governments have done their part to implement the recommendations, which I think for the most part they haven't. Okay.
Grand Chief Serge Simon, where do you come down on that?
Well, when it comes to the report, I fully respect Judge Sinclair, and I've read some of the volumes here that they sent to us and the horror stories that were in it. And I can't imagine Judge Sinclair going through all those interviews and coming out of it without some scars. I read a good portion of these volumes, and I don't know, it's so disheartening that grown-ups, grown people would go and do such things to children, to any child. There's no justification for that. But it takes time. It may have taken 120, 130 years to get to this point. It might take a little bit longer to try to find an adequate way for First Nations to overcome the breaking of that chain within our own evolution because of the residential schools. But governments, you know as well as I do not act at lightning speed. Everything is scrutinized to a fault. So it's going to take time, but we can't slip in our own responsibilities as First Nation governments to keep up the pressure. We got to keep on holding the governments accountable to the changes that need to happen if we're going to reestablish our own evolution under our own terms.
All right, Gabrielle, where do you come down on that question of whether you believe the Truth and Reconciliation Commission has essentially achieved its mission?
I feel that the TRC did everything that they needed to do, everything that they wanted to do in order to achieve reconciliation. However, I do believe that reconciliation is ultimately the responsibility of Canadians. It is not up to Indigenous people to repair the harms that Canadians have done to Indigenous peoples. And right now, what we're seeing is that the burden is falling on the shoulders of Indigenous people, and that's just not fair. A lot of young people that I work with actually believe that reconciliation is dead. And that's what they say. Reconciliation is dead. And that's not to take away any of the work that the TRC has done or that survivors have done, but that's a reflection on the Canadian government.
We will surely come back to that comment because that's a very stark way to describe where things are at today. So to be sure, Gabrielle, we'll come back on that. I wanted to give you to weigh in first, and now batting cleanup, if I can put it that way. Clayton Chert, you're the elder among us here. Let's get your view on this.
Well, first of all, I don't consider myself an elder. I'm just elderly, I guess. I'm getting old. That's the title they've given me and everything. But I don't really recognize myself as an elder. That's my community. They do that. So with that, but I was just thinking about when they came here a few years ago. The commission came and we sat in Queen's Park, and I was part of that. I was doing a pipe ceremony there, and we did the ceremony, and all the ministers, everybody was there, and it was part of it. And so as they traveled, it was really something to see, and I was amazed, and I was very happy to be there. But I knew that this was just the beginning of the beginning, and to just say that it's really important to keep this conversation going, because that's all it is. It's just nothing's been done. That's the reality. Nothing has been done.
If that was the beginning of the beginning, where do you think we are right now?
We're still there. We're still trying to have that conversation, and we need, and I get the youth, I get their frustration, but it's with us, what we're trying to do, and what I'm trying to do, and other people, is to keep that conversation alive. That's all. It's up to them to take that responsibility and to say, okay, and to have that conversation and keep it alive, because in the reality of all of this, nothing has been ever done yet, right? When it comes to those 94 recommendations and all of this. And so when I talk to so many people and not native and non-native and all of this, they this government and all the other governments are going to come and go. They always like to write a report, right? And Canada has a history of writing reports, and then they put it on a shelf, right? And then they tell the people that, and then they give this illusion that they give to the people, the citizens, all of these things, that we did something about this. And so they mislead their own people and saying to them, look, we did something. And I get this conversation with them all the time. They said, hey, didn't we do something about this? All right. No. They just wrote a report.
Forgive me. Let's go through some of this then, if we can. Yeah. Well, let me just remind everybody, there were a number of general areas that the TRC recommendations tried to focus on: education, language and culture, and child welfare, health, justice, reconciliation. Gabrielle, we will come back to that. Pamela, you're a lawyer, so let's start with justice. What needs to be done immediately today to make Indigenous people in Canada think, we've made some progress on justice?
End genocide. I mean, it's as simple as that. It means clear out the prisons, which are stuffed with Indigenous peoples, and that includes youth corrections. I mean, the fastest growing prison population is little Indigenous girls. Some of the youth correction centers are 98% Indigenous girls. We need to clear out group homes and foster homes and keep Indigenous children with their families. You know, we need to make sure that all Indigenous people are housed. They have the basics like clean drinking water. The fact that I'm talking to you about clean drinking water seems surreal. And so I think when we're talking about reconciliation, that's where we need to go on the ground, dealing with things like murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. When we talk about things like a legislative amendment here, a policy change here, an apology over here, that's all at the high superficial political level. It's not at the ground where the people are. And I would welcome any politician from any level of government to walk into an urban center like Winnipeg, downtown Winnipeg, in a pandemic in the winter, and take a look at all the Indigenous peoples there and say, we're making progress on reconciliation. And that's literally how stark it is. This is literally about life and death. It shouldn't be in this political realm that it is.
All right, let's go right to the ground then. And Serge Simon, I'd like you to follow up with a conversation about health. Talk to us about what things are like on the ground, where you are, particularly in a COVID-19 age.
Well, like everybody across the country, it's not easy. Here in Quebec, we're seeing 3,000 plus more cases every day. Government's trying to grab a hold of this situation, bring it under control. We have vaccinations coming in. But when it comes to First Nation health, as Pam was mentioning a little while ago, everything else seems to fall to the wayside. We need palliative care. We need to get our own health institutions using some of our traditional healing ways, our own traditional knowledge of plants to heal. And we need to really keep an eye on our own situation. Like I said, our own evolution was changed because of residential schools.
Can I just confirm, Grand Chief, you are getting vaccines, though, in your community?
We're being told that possibly next month. We're not sure exactly how many vaccines we're getting or which one was Pfizer or Moderna or something else. So we're looking at the logistics right now to start the vaccination program. Whether there'll be enough vaccines for everyone in the community is another matter. But we are in contact with health organizations from around the provincial jurisdiction, as well as with federal. So what Pam is mentioning there is, again, the disparity or the lack of prioritizing when it comes to First Nations people, maybe because we're just not that significant in contributing to their economy. So oftentimes we'll fall through the cracks for that very reason.
Well, for what it's worth, there's stories in the newspapers today about the fact that seniors who don't live in long-term care homes, they're going to be moving themselves further down they're not moving themselves, but they are being moved further down the list of receiving vaccines, just because there are others that, in the wisdom of health officials, they feel are more of a priority. I don't know. How do you react to that?
Well, I think it's up to us to make it the priority. Don't just depend on them. That's the thing about this. We hold the federal government accountable for this or that. Yeah, that's fine. But we have a lot of work to do on our side. And when it comes to implementing our own destiny or our own ways of doing things within our communities, that's up to us. Our own inherent lawmaking authority compels us to do these things for our own people. And you don't always have to take their word for it.
Okay, Clayton Shirt, let's look at one of those other areas of recommendation from the TRC, and that was language and culture. Are things better on those two fronts today than they were before the TRC held hearings?
Absolutely. I think they are. There was I'm part of that generation that my parents were part of the 60s, right? And there was a large majority of us were gathering our medicines and our teachers and becoming finding our identities, and my parents gave me that. And Murray's part of that. right? He's a little older than me, but he was a good friend of my mom and my dad's, and they were doing that. So that cultural stuff is there. There was a time when we weren't allowed to do this, but we're allowed to be cultural. But then there's cultural, and then there's spiritual. So all of these things, so those things are very important. We're allowed to do those things now, but still things need to be a little more. And so, and all of this. And so I wanted to say this, and I think that one of those recommendations is to talk about that spiritual part. And that what I mean by that is the doctrine of discovery to be denounced. And there hasn't been any denouncement of that. No, out of the Christians who enforced this on us 500 years ago, that is still there. It's in, you could ask Pam. It's in there. It's in the Canadian Constitution. It's in the American Constitution. It's in there. So that has to be addressed, and that's a denouncement of that document. Right, the doctrine of discovery, and that's what that document says. To what it said, it says we have the right to do whatever we want to anything that's non-Christian, to take whatever we want. And so that's that spiritual part. We had a way of life. It was a beautiful way of life, and we're trying to get back to that. And from coast to coast, from nation to nation, this is what we're trying to do, to allow our youth to say, hey, there's a way of life here, and we're doing this. And so it's so important that we have those supports, and we have our allies, we have our people. And there's, what happened is it wasn't just us. We're not talking about civil rights, human rights, etc. We're talking about our rights. We're talking about as human beings, and that's our way of life. We are the human beings, and every tribe, every nation has had a way of expressing that. I am Cree, I am Anishinaabe, right? I am a human being before I'm my race, my gender, my class, my citizenship, my age, etc. Nothing wrong with those things. They just come second. They all is well. But we are the human beings, and we have a way of being. And this is what we're trying to say to our youth. This is what we're trying to do for our youth. And so, with the 94 recommendations is part of that. It's just part of that. And so it's so important. And I see that so many Canadians don't understand that. And it's very disheartening when I see that. Because they're saying, well, wait a minute. And I just want to say this. I think it's important. Mm-hmm. And it's very important for us as who we are as Indigenous people. We're the people. And colonialism, colonization has been trying to erase that memory from us since the beginning. But we've always said we're willing to talk, because we said this in the beginning when the settlers came. We said to them, you have your way of life, we have ours. Let's go down to the river of life together, but you need to stay in your boat. We said this to them in the past, and we keep saying this. We don't want anything different from everyone else, and we want to contribute to this culture.
Yeah, I appreciate the metaphor I've heard in the past of two canoes simultaneously going down the river together, side by side, but separate. I understand. Separate. Gabrielle, I got to get you back into this conversation here, and I want to find out more about this group that you've started called A7G, the Assembly of Seven Generations. What's that a reference to?
Yeah, so as A7G, we started out really getting a spark from the work of Idle No More and that movement that happened in 2012. It really lit a lot of sparks for Indigenous youth, I think, across the country. And so myself and some young people started to really mobilize. The one thing that we really noticed was missing from a lot of conversations at that time was that there really wasn't a youth voice. So youth were mobilizing, but they really weren't being heard. And so we just started working, and 9 years later, we're here today, and we do a lot of groundwork with Indigenous youth. We do a lot of crisis intervention, unfortunately, and that speaks to the little work that has been done for Indigenous youth. We're still having to intervene in crisis, in suicide, preventing homelessness, helping young people find jobs, all kinds of things that, every Canadian takes for granted. Indigenous youth, us, we have to take the responsibility of doing these things because we have little to no resources, capacity, or support.
Gabrielle, can I ask how old you are?
I'm 32.
How many friends have you lost to suicide in your young life?
More than I can count on two hands.
Well, that may help explain the comments that you made earlier, which were very stark when you said, in your view, reconciliation is dead. What did you mean by that?
So we've done so much work on trying to educate Canadians about the harms that have been done to Indigenous peoples. There's so many reports, and my fellow panelists have also said this. There's like a whole library of reports that the Canadian government can utilize and to help guide their work forward. However, they continue to ignore these reports. They continue to disregard the work that Indigenous people have done to get a better life, to get out of this crisis situation that we often find ourselves in. And I think for Indigenous youth, the final straw in this conversation about reconciliation was when the Canadian government invaded Wet'suwet'en territory last year. It was just, how can we talk about repairing harms that have been done when we're still in the process of witnessing them happening in real time? It's not like it happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It's happening right in front of our faces. You know, we're seeing the actions and the words are very, very different. They don't align at all.
Gabrielle is, of course, connected to youth through her work, and Pamela, you obviously are connected to youth through your perch at Ryerson University. What we've just heard is a very stark and bleak recitation of where things are at. Do you share that view?
No, I entirely share that view, because here's the thing about the youth voices. They're not through a political filter. They're not through a filter of, self-promotion and, trying to get a seat on a board or trying to make political favors. It's what they see. It's what they experience. It's what they live. And it's pretty hard to reconcile, Prime Minister Trudeau's commitments to reconciliation, which are good. I mean, the change in rhetoric is good. So he gets that part, and say there's no relationship more important. We're focused on rights and all of that stuff, but we have to take important first steps. We're not going to make these changes overnight, but boy, if he wants to buy a multi-billion-dollar pipeline, that decision will come overnight. And similarly, look at the health crisis in our communities, that they have been chronically underfunding. But the second there's a pandemic issue, they have the ability to instantly call in the military and provide medical care, but only to certain groups. So the youth see that for what it is. You can't justify that. You can't plead with the youth, oh, just be patient, because they're living that disconnect between the promise and the reality of what they could be doing. Because keep in mind, it's our lands and our resources. And if we only had just a small fraction of those lands and resources, we would be entirely self-sufficient, and we wouldn't even be having to have conversations with governments about do your obligations. We could be doing it ourselves. But they don't want to recognize our right to self-determination. They don't want to share with us our own resources, yet they blatantly breach every law in their own domestic legal system around human rights and Indigenous rights, and at the international level. And so we can't win. And youth see that for what it is. They don't have those political blinders on, and they're calling it out. And so when they say reconciliation is dead, we need to be listening to the youth, because we depend on them to be the frontline defenders in the future, like many of them are now. Think about who are all the land defenders and water protectors. They're mostly youth following the lead of other warriors and people on the ground. And so we can't have them losing hope about where we go in the future. But I agree with Grand Chief that, that starts with us. But the government, they have to pick a side. Are you going to do it and do it properly? Or are you going to recognize our right to be self-determining and let us do it the way we want to? Because we certainly couldn't screw it up any worse than they have.
Well, Pamela, I hear you. And I don't want to give the impression of being optimistic or hopeful if you all genuinely believe there is no reason for that. But having said that, Can you focus on where things are, for example, in education? You're ensconced at a university, at a very prominent university in this country. Do you see improvements in the education of Indigenous young people since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action came out?
I do. And, you know, for viewers of this show, I want them to understand that what we're talking about here, all of us on this panel and in the larger conversation, our strong criticisms isn't a lack of hope. We're being critically hopeful, which is better than being toxically positive, where you just pretend there's no problems and you pretend everything's okay. We're saying, here's all the problems so we can fix it, and whose role in that. And I have seen an improvement. I mean, the fact that outside of government, you have universities and K-12 schools who have actually embraced the TRC and what it stood for, you know, and its calls to action. And you've seen businesses do that. You've seen community groups. You've seen human rights groups. You've seen lots of Canadians do what the government really isn't doing. And what I would like to see, though, is not just focus on the TRC, but there's a national inquiry Indigenous women and girls that had hundreds of recommendations. The Royal Commission on Aboriginal People, hundreds of recommendations. Every inquest into a shooting death of us, every inquiry, public commission, and our own voices. I mean, we've literally been saying the same thing since contact. Respect our right to be self-determining, respect our lands and resources, and let's find a way to work together. I mean, it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that unless you're invested in the status quo and you don't want to give that up. What I see is really hopeful is that our people are still on the ground defending our rights, and Canadians are standing there right beside us. And that's hopeful. And I think the TRC, reports like the TRC and the National Inquiry and others have helped really educate Canadians in a way where governments have failed to educate Canadians.
Okay, so this may, Grand Chief, come down to a discussion about patience. There are some Indigenous people in this country who have completely run out of patience, and that is it. They're ready to throw in the towel. There are others who are prepared to give Canadians a little more time, to be a little more patient to get to the finish line. Where are you?
Well, first of all, I share the concerns with the youth, but you also have to recognize that one of the virtues of youth is impatience. Well, the elders kind of lament, where did all the young buy so fast? There are those in the middle of us that have to take everything we have right now, like the Royal Commission on Indigenous People, the UNDRIP, the American Declaration, which is oftentimes ignored. You see it in the Truth and Reconciliation, the implementation of UNDRIP as one of the recommendations. But what did the Canadian government do? They said, we will implement UNDRIP so long as it is compatible to Canadian law. When it's Canadian law that got us in this mess in the first place. And now they're going to tangle up the UNDRIP within Canadian law, and we're back to square one. So I share a lot of their discouragements because I have to sit at the table and I have to watch this happen while trying to fight against it, trying to be diplomatic, trying to be a voice of peace, a voice of reason. Canadians have to understand that the recognition of Aboriginal title and the rights that come with it, the sharing of resources, isn't going to take anything away from them. It's going to enhance their society that they've created for themselves. Now that they've recognized the horrors of their ways, of how they imposed their dominance over us. Terra nullius, another thing, no repudiation, at least no serious one. But there is an argument that by implementing UNDRIP, which UNDRIP in the preamble mentions that terra nullius is morally unenforceable, and that the Canadian government did implement it, is in itself a repudiation. But then, if you take UNDRIP or any articles to the courts will not look at the preamble, but look at the articles and what Canadian law would be attached to it. So I'm getting a little discouraged myself when I keep seeing these beautiful promises being made to us, and all the hard work that was done, the sacrifices by people like Judge St. Clair. And I'm looking at where we were, where we're going, and how fast we're getting there. I share some of the youth's impatience.
Okay, you
But
mentioned
also-
his name. I hear what you're saying, and you mentioned Murray Sinclair's name there again. So I'd
Yes.
like to play another clip from him. Here he is. We talked to him at the beginning of the program from almost 10 years ago. Here he is from last month. Let's see if anything's different. Shelton, roll it if you would.
Others that I know of who are now growing up in this day and age have examples like perhaps mine, but others as well, to see what it means to be patient, to persevere against hatred and discrimination and actions that are not acceptable, to be courageous and to strive to be wise, and to learn how to apply all of that in a way that is not harmful to others.
Gabrielle, how does or does not all of that resonate with you?
It just feels like we're saying the same message over and over again with very little progress on behalf of the Canadian government. Too, Canadians as a whole have to take responsibility as well. It's exhausting. And I think that that's something that we just saw in that clip. You know, Justice Murray Sinclair is getting tired, just as we're all so tired of having the same conversation over and over again. It's really like being in an abusive relationship, and the abuser continues to apologize but never changes their harmful behavior. Eventually, you just walk away. And that's really where we're getting to. I just like can't even express how discouraging it is, how awful it feels to be living in these crises. You know, I not only do I have friends that have passed away from suicide, but I also have people in my family and friends that have been part of the MMIW crisis.
Murdered and missing Indigenous women.
Represented. Yeah, murdered and missing Indigenous women, which is a crisis, a Canadian crisis. I also have so many young people that I work with that have been in and out of incarceration. There's so many youth that we work with that are part of the child welfare system. And these are things that the Canadian government perpetuates. There's no solutions that they will take and actually put action into. So we have to do it. Indigenous people have to carry the burden of that reconciliation. And that's not fair at all.
Clayton Sherp, we're going to give you the last word on the program. Go ahead, please.
Well, I would just say about reconciliation, you know, I think there's a misunderstanding again about what the word means. You look it up, and I just say this to Aaron, I'm going to speak in plain, simple terms. You look the word up, and what does it mean? It just means friendly relations. That's all it means. Truth. And so when I say this, I, as an Indigenous man, I don't have to reconcile with anything. The only thing I have to reconcile with is the impressions left in my mind of colonialism and colonization, all of these things. And I've been struggling with this for my whole life. And I say this, and so that's the only thing as Indigenous people we have to reconcile with. Friendly relations, again, with our spirit, our heart, our body, our mind, to find that balance again. And so as human beings, we say to our brothers and sisters, we say, yes, this is what we're trying to do. They have to reconcile with what their ancestors have done. So they have to do that. It's their responsibility. It's I'm a human being. I am independent but dependent on everyone else, a nation, a tribe, my community. So it's very important to understand that. So when I try to decolonize my mind and I say, okay, this is all I have to reconcile with, was who I am as a human being, as a Anishinaabe man. And so I encourage our youth, right? You guys don't have to reconcile with nothing but that, with those impressions left. So, and of colonialism. So I take great, very, very hopeful, but again, hope has to be based in reality. Because if it's not, then it's just fantasy. And I know that word gets thrown around a lot. And I just say that to the youth, and so the reality is, it is a struggle, but there is the Creator has given us something besides life. The greatest gift besides life is our intelligence, our minds. And so I encourage our youth to use that again, do more thinking, right, about this. Don't believe anything they're telling you, right? As Indigenous people, that word belief, again, was never said this here. In Indigenous languages, we don't have a word for that, the word belief. And that word belief is use it cautiously, because this is what they did. They forced us to believe in something we didn't want to believe in. Their way of being, their way of life. And so we need to understand that, and we come to the terms. We know who we are, and this is what we're trying to do. And so I say to our youth to keep going, to keep struggling. And it is going to be a struggle for all of us as human beings. We're in a critical time. The earth is being threatened, etc., all of these things. And so the truth and reconciliation is just a conversation. So I encourage the youth and I encourage everyone to keep that conversation alive, because that's all it is. It's just a conversation. And so we can borrow from the past to be present, to look forward to a new future as Canadians, whatever identity that you want to hold on to. But we know who we are. We are the Indigenous people. So I just want to say that, and I want to say thank you for all these people who come here to speak their truth. And so, miigwech to all of you.
Miigwech to you. Let me echo those views, and we thank you for coming into TVO tonight, metaphorically speaking, to have this very important conversation. Clayton Shirt, Gabrielle Fayant, Pam Palmater, Grand Chief Serge Simon, good wishes to all of you, and stay safe out there. Thank you.
Miigwech.
Profound injustice inflicts injury that is devastating and hard to heal. For communities and peoples that have experienced that kind of deep trauma, more than policy or apologies are required. With us to consider some of what that might entail, we welcome, in Kingston, Ontario, Father Raymond D'Souza, chaplain of Newman House at Queen's University and a senior fellow at Cardus, that's a Canadian Christian think tank. In Fort Erie, Ontario, Jennifer Dockstader, Executive Director of the Fort Erie Native Friendship Centre. And in Midtown TO, John Moskowitz, Rabbi Emeritus at Holy Blossom Temple and the author of Evolution of an Unorthodox Rabbi, which he is. And it's great to welcome all of you to TVO tonight. Jennifer, I want to start with you because it's been 5 years since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action came out. And I want to know, in your view, whether or not you think it has led to greater justice for Indigenous peoples in this country.
Not by a long shot, unfortunately. We still have so much work to do.
Not by a long shot, you say, but can you say that the yardsticks are at least moving?
I would say that in some areas the yardsticks are moving, and I'm seeing education to young people starting to move. I think that it's going to take a long time and a couple of generations yet to actually educate everybody to the point that they understand what the injustices are.
John Moskowitz, in your view, well, let me set it up this way. You represent a people that have been through their share of historical trauma. Can a 5-year-old report with many recommendations still incomplete, can that help heal a community?
Not in the least. This is not about a 5-year-old report. This is about a recovery from trauma imposed by the government of Canada on the Indigenous nations of the country. And it will take a great deal of education, as Jennifer said, a great deal of time, recovery of a culture, and the acknowledgement, as you're suggesting, of the trauma.
Do you have a sense about, as you look through history, about how long it takes for that mission to be accomplished?
Every culture is different. Look, my people, the Jews, were in exile after the destruction of the temple for the better part of 2,000 years. We were able to sustain because learning sustained and family sustained in exile. That's not necessarily the case with First Nations. Families were separated, education was farmed out to government schools. It's going to be much harder. There is no full healing. There is no full recovery, but there can be recovery. It does take time. It takes courage, and it takes the support of the Canadian people and the government.
Raymond D'Souza, we live in a Western-style country that, when it sees a problem, tends to appoint a commission and write a study. And we do that for a lot of different issues, and we've done it many, many times on this issue as well. In your view, can we make progress taking that approach?
Well, on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, you're right. It's one of several commissions. In terms of practical steps, when you go through the recommendations, there's a lot to be done. But I think unusually for government commissions, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission actually did change in a significant way how things are discussed and talked about. The sesquicentennial of the country in 2017, was quite a bit different. Public ceremonies around the country are different. The namings of buildings at my university, Queen's University, you had a program about the Sir John A. Macdonald Law School. So actually, I think that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, in terms of practical steps of improved livelihoods for Indigenous Canadians, may be lacking, as has been pointed out. But in terms of changing the conversation and how people think about Canada's history, it's actually, I would say, quite an unusually large impact for a government report.
We've returned to this subject many times on this program, and I just want to play a half a minute of a clip from a program we did last year. This is York University professor Susan Dion weighing in on this issue. Sheldon, the clip, if you would.
What I want Canadians to do is take responsibility, to know that their privilege comes at a cost to Indigenous people. And this, I think, is the critical point, that Canadians don't want to recognize that the benefits that they have, the very land that they live on, the resources that are the wealth of this nation come at a cost to Indigenous people.
Jennifer Dockstader, if we took that view, if we took that approach, would we be better off?
I believe that it would, because it takes the average Canadian to actually recognize that, not shy away from uncomfortable conversations because of guilt or shame or even calling things lies. The reason that we do land acknowledgements is to remind Canadians of privilege. It's also an affirming statement for who we are as Indigenous people. So there's many things, and the recognition that it's not my responsibility to help Canada heal. Of course, I'm going to help in any way that I can, but I have my own family and my own life and my own community that I need to work with. And actually giving me the resources to repair what has been lost, the loss of language. At the Friendship Center here, we're offering 4 different languages on a regular basis, and we get people from all over North America coming in on Zoom to relearn their own Indigenous languages. And some of the messages we're getting around that is that's the first time they've heard their languages. But seriously, the ones that touch me the most are the residential school survivors who for the first time feel safe to actually speak their language and learn their language without shame or guilt or fear. And that's a reality that I don't think the average Canadian understands about what us as Indigenous people are actually going through. At the same time that we're having these philosophical debates about what's the best way to do and what policies to face, we still have the Mi'kmaq fishermen who are attacked violently. We have 1492 Land Back Lane that is actually treaty land in question from developers. And it's going to take a whole of Canada approach to actually almost, on the one hand, reconcile that Canada is not who they believe that they are, while at the same time supporting us to do what we need to do to heal. And of course, resourcing it appropriately. I can't stress that enough. Stop talking about the tax dollars you pay and stop assuming that I don't pay taxes. I absolutely do. And let's start talking about repairing relationships, making relationships honest. So there's a lot of work to be done. And it's going to take past my generation. I'm committed to trying to help as much as I possibly can. But that's also to understand that it is my grandparents that were in residential school and my family that has been impacted by multi-generational trauma. And I'm working in a community that is still being torn apart by all sorts of systemic racism, racism within towns and cities, children that are being removed. Unfortunately, the atrocities don't stop just because you've finished writing a report, and some people are remembering to do land acknowledgements.
John Moskowitz, as we saw in that clip, you were on that program. I'm kind of curious to know what you were thinking as Susan Dion said that, and what your views are on it today.
I think I was both naive and wrong at that point. And I assumed that it wasn't my problem. And that program woke me up to a degree. And I've done some reading and some learning. And I do understand in a way that I didn't quite at that moment that the responsibility is that of all Canadians, driven obviously by First Nations, supported deeply by the government, but has to be supported by all of us.
Raymond D'Souza, you heard what Susan Dion had to say. What do you think?
Well, I think there's two ways to understand it. The first way is to say, well, look, that there are the Indigenous peoples of this country are not participating fully now or in the past in the prosperity, in the freedoms of this country which draw people from all over the world. And if that's the case, I think you'd have a widespread consensus and support for, if you want to say, including in a better way the Indigenous peoples of the country and the prosperity of the country. The other way of interpreting that, which I think would get less support, is especially from, say, immigrants in the last 30 or 40 years, is an implication that their success in the country is ill-gotten somehow or has come at the expense of Indigenous Canadians. Now, you can interpret what she said in two different ways. I think on the first interpretation, you'd find actually quite widespread support. On the second, I think you would find more reluctance to endorse that point of view.
I do want Jennifer to have a chance to speak to that, but before we do that, you know, Rabbi John, I want to just come back to you for a second, because I got to say, we don't have too many people who come on this program and say, I've thought about this issue since I was last here, and I may not have been right last time. I may need to reevaluate my position. That's rare. What brought you to that?
Thinking about it, the experience of being on your show a year ago, whenever it was, and realizing the huge gap between the experience of First Nations peoples and my own. I sometimes recoil when I hear that I am, or Jews are, people of privilege, but it's true. There are people of privilege and there are people of less privilege. We have a responsibility to one another.
Okay, Jennifer Dockstader, can I get you now to respond to part of what Father D'Souza had to say, in as much as it sounds as if he's saying, if you're a new immigrant to Canada and you've only been here for a matter of years, it's really not fair to require you to carry the can for the sins of 100 years ago. Is that fair to say?
No, absolutely not. Immigrants choose to come to Canada for a variety of reasons. One, to attain what the privileged in Canada actually already have achieved in some sort of material wealth. Others come from because they have to flee their own countries and come to a land of safety. And no matter how you look at it, and there's many reasons why immigrants come, the point is that they have a choice. This is our land. We have been here since the beginning of time. And there isn't a matter of choice. There's nowhere that we could go to immigrate to escape violence. The only thing that we can continue to do is work with this existing colonial government and help them to realize their own humanity. And I really appreciate what the rabbi said in terms of privilege. I'm coming to you. I'm an Indigenous person of privilege. This is the reason why. Because I'm on a TV show and I'm able to use my voice and my title to have conversations like this.
But let me jump in. Jennifer,
a
forgive me.
paying job.
Let me jump in for a second, because I think we need a better understanding of why somebody who may have been living in poverty, let's say in some very poor country halfway around the world, who gets to Canada last week and suddenly all of the issues around colonialism are thrust on that person's shoulders and they're responsible for that as well? Are we saying that?
Because they chose. They chose to come here. And when you choose to adopt a country, you choose to adopt its history and its problems. And you don't get to opt out of what you don't like in favor of what you do like. In other words, we're expecting some level of emotional maturity of human beings, which we, as the Haudenosaunee, would call a good mind. We don't get to opt out of the bad things just to say, well, that doesn't involve me. Because guess what? We're on this land together, and we do have a responsibility toward one another.
Okay, let me get Raymond D'Souza to respond to that.
Well, my point, first point there was simply is what people actually might think. I would say that, the experience of people in this country who come here because they think it's a good country, they think it's a fair country, they think it's a just country, they think it's a prosperous country. When they arrive here and then are told that it's not a fair and just country, I think generally speaking, they are open to hearing other stories. But you can't persuade them or that somehow they made a choice to come and perpetrate or participate in an evil. That's not how they came here. That's not how they thought about coming here. So I think you can invite people to understand what took place before they arrived. And that applies to people who've been in the country for many decades as well, to learn the history of the country. But I think we're touching upon something here that's quite important, is that most people who have come to Canada would have come here because they have a generally favorable view of the liberty, justice, freedom, prosperity of this country. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission told a different story. And you have to have both of those stories, if you're going to have reconciliation, sort of be talking to one another. And you're not going to persuade many people that the country is fundamentally and completely a wicked enterprise if they chose to come here, right? At the same time, if you have people come here and say, I'm not interested in any other stories other than my own or the history of my own people in this land, you're not going to have reconciliation either. So you need both stories, I would suggest, to speak to one another. It's not an easy conversation, though, I would agree.
Let me follow up with Rabbi John on that one, which is, I presume you've been to Germany at some point in your life relatively recently. Yes, Rabbi?
Yes.
Okay, and I don't know this, but I'm presuming that you, like many others, think that the job that Germany has done in reconciling its appalling Nazi past is pretty good. At least I've heard that from many people who've gone to Germany. Is that fair to say as well?
Well, it is. Berlin is a remarkable place. And the first time I was there, which is about 20 years ago, I was stunned by what I saw. Because rather than pretending away the past, rather than pretending that nothing happened, what you have right in the center of Germany, they kept alive pre-Weimar Germany, Weimar Germany, Nazi Germany, especially communist Germany, and contemporary Berlin and Germany. That's a remarkable and sophisticated approach, and it's a paradigm that I think every country should copy.
So let me ask the follow-up. With that knowledge that you have in place, how well do you think Canada has done to reconcile its past with Indigenous people compared to what you've seen in Germany?
I don't think you can fully reconcile the past. And by the way, there's no such thing as full recovery. There's no such thing as full healing. But there have to be strong attempts at it, and you can recover significantly. I don't think you can do it without, and I don't think land acknowledgements does it. I think a people has to have a land, especially people that has had the land previously. You don't recover from loss of a land without recovering the land itself, or at least part of it. So I think that's a crucial part of this story, that unless the government is prepared to cede more significant land to First Nations, this will continue to be a trauma, not just for the Indigenous peoples, but also for all of Canada.
Jennifer Dockstader, a tough question, and sad to say, we only have 30 seconds left for you to answer it. So give it your best shot here. We had a guest earlier in the program who said reconciliation is dead. A young 32-year-old woman said reconciliation is dead. Do you agree?
Unfortunately, I do. And here's why. I think that the average Canadian has let it die. And that these arguments, and with all due respect to the father, I think that he needs to do the reading that the rabbi has done, actually, and do some introspection and some reflection, actually, on his views, because he speaks like a man of privilege, a man who has enjoyed the benefits of colonialism. Try talking to Indigenous people about what the real life everyday experience is, and that is very different from yours, Father. And I don't mean to be hostile. I don't mean to be hostile and blaming, but what I am saying is that these conversations are important because they're uncomfortable. And off air, I'd love to have you call me, Father, and you and I can have a conversation about my experience and yours and come to a point of humanity. Ultimately, I think that is the overarching issue that allows trauma to continue in any people, amongst any culture. And that is we cease to see each other as human beings.
Jennifer, forgive me, I've got to jump in and journalistically, I've got to give the father a chance to respond to that. Go ahead, Father.
Well, I don't know why that other guest said reconciliation is dead, but reconciliation requires difficult conversations to be had. And I think, well, you know, in Jennifer's response, I'm sorry to say that it's a bit patronizing and it is hostile. And that is why reconciliation is more difficult than maybe we think. And I would hate to say it's dead, but that particular approach isn't very fruitful.
We need more time, and we need you three back to continue this conversation, which needs to go, which needs much more time to continue. But I'm grateful that we got it started tonight.
Interesting that you talk about being patronizing, Father. Perhaps you should roll back the tape from this tonight, and then we'll talk about patronizing. Have a good day, everybody, and thank you both for coming and having this conversation.
Thanks to the three of you for joining us tonight.
Most welcome. Thank you, Steve.
And that is the agenda for Wednesday, January 20th, 2021. Tomorrow, we'll check in on the enforcement and policing side of Ontario's second state of emergency during the pandemic. Also, in advance of our new series that kicks off on Friday in partnership with the Toronto Star, examining the future of democracy, we'll talk to American political scientist Francis Fukuyama for his diagnosis of what ails U.S. politics today. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.